I'd found a secret mortgage on our home, funding her lover's lavish lifestyle. It started like a slow-motion train wreck, the kind you see on the news and think, that could never happen to me. But it did. It was late, way past midnight, and I was up because of a stupid work deadline. The house was quiet. Sarah was asleep, or so I thought. I was just trying to clear my head, scrolling through some financial sites on my laptop, just keeping an eye on our accounts. That's when I saw it. A payment. A big one. Not to any of our usual creditors, not to a utility company, not even a credit card. This was a mortgage payment. A second mortgage. On our home. My blood went cold. I remember thinking, okay, this is a mistake, some kind of system error. I clicked on it, my hands shaking so bad I could barely grip the mouse. The details loaded, and my stomach dropped. It was dated 6 months ago. And the recipient? The recipient was a name I'd never seen before in my life. A man's name. A fancy, almost pretentious-sounding name. It felt like a punch to the gut, a silent explosion in the otherwise still house. I sat there, staring at the screen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound breaking the deafening silence in my head. I kept refreshing the page, hoping it would just vanish, that it was some kind of digital phantom. But it didn't. It was real. That's when the first wave of nausea hit. And look, before we go any further, if any of this is hitting you hard, if it's making you feel something, please hit that subscribe button. Seriously, it means the world. And if you're feeling this, chances are others will too, so share it. Leave a comment, let me know what you think, how you'd react. Your engagement is what keeps this going, what lets me get this out. Sarah and we'd built this life brick by brick. This house was supposed to be the cornerstone, the place where we'd grow old, where we'd raise kids, though that hadn't happened yet. We'd been together for 10 years, married for 7. It was comfortable, familiar, the kind of love that's less about fireworks and more about shared silence and knowing glances. Or so I thought. She's the kind of person who makes the mundane feel vibrant. She has this way of lighting up a room even when she's just making coffee in her pajamas. Always has been. She works in marketing, deals with aesthetics and image. I'm an architect. I build things, practical things, with blueprints and concrete. We were a good balance, I guess. Or I was convinced we were. We'd just gotten back from a trip to Napa a few months before this. It was supposed to be a romantic getaway, a celebration of our anniversary. She'd picked out the vineyard, booked the fancy dinners. Everything was perfect. Too perfect, maybe, looking back. Now, this mortgage. It wasn't a small loan. It was enough to feel substantial, significant. Enough to make me wonder what in God's name she'd been thinking. My mind raced, scrambling for explanations. Had she made a mistake? Had she taken out a loan for something innocent, something I'd forgotten about? But the name, the recipient's name, was completely foreign. It wasn't a company name. It was a person, a first and last name. And then there was the destination of the funds, or at least the initial payout. That was even more baffling. It was transferred to an offshore account. Offshore. My gut clenched again. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. I spent the rest of that night in a haze, perched at my laptop, pretending to work, but my mind was a hurricane. Every memory of Sarah, every happy moment, was now tainted, twisted, re-examined. Was she always this good of an actress? Had she been lying to me all along? The sheer betrayal of it was a physical ache, a hollow space opening up inside me. I looked at the digital photo frame on my desk, cycling through pictures of us. Sarah laughing on a beach, Sarah beaming on our wedding day, Sarah asleep beside me in bed. Each image felt like a lie, a carefully constructed facade. I felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp, quickly followed by a crushing wave of sadness. How could she do this? To us? To our home? I tried to piece together a narrative that made sense, any narrative that didn't involve what I was increasingly starting to suspect. Maybe she was helping a family member, someone I didn't know about, but an offshore account and a secret mortgage? It just didn't add up. I closed my laptop, the screen going dark, reflecting my own pale, drawn face. I tiptoed into our bedroom, careful not to wake her. She was asleep, her breathing soft and even, her face peaceful. It was the face of the woman I loved, the woman I trusted, and the contrast between that serene image and the churning turmoil inside me was almost unbearable. I stood there for a long time, just watching her, trying to reconcile the two realities, the Sarah I knew and the Sarah who had apparently taken out a secret mortgage to fund something or someone else. The next morning was a masterclass in performance. I woke up, went through the motions of getting ready for work, made coffee, kissed her goodbye, her usual routine. She seemed completely oblivious. Her eyes, those bright, expressive eyes, held no trace of guilt or deception. Or maybe she was just that good. That's what scared me the most. I drove to work, the city streets a blur of indifferent faces. My mind, however, was anything but indifferent. It was a battlefield. I replayed every conversation, every glance, every moment of intimacy, searching for clues, for any hint of the secret she'd been keeping. Was there something I'd missed? A change in her behavior? A new phone call? I remembered her being a little more distant lately, a little more preoccupied. I'd attributed it to stress at work, her demanding job. Now I wondered, was that distance a symptom of her secret life?
The more I thought, the more the pieces, horrifying as they were, began to slot into place. That new expensive handbag she'd suddenly acquired? The unexpected shopping sprees? I chalked it up to her getting a bonus, or just her general appreciation for nice things. But now, with this secret mortgage hanging over my head, those little luxuries took on a sinister new meaning. I spent the day in a daze, barely registering what was happening around me. My colleagues talked about project deadlines, about zoning laws, about the latest sports scores. I nodded along, my voice a distant echo in my own ears. All I could think about was Sarah and this other man, this lover. The thought was a physical blow. I'd never been a jealous man, but the idea of her with someone else, especially with our shared financial security being plundered to facilitate it, was a different kind of agony. It was a violation on so many levels. It wasn't just about the money. It was about trust, about the foundation of our entire relationship. I felt a simmering rage beneath the surface, a constant tremor that threatened to break through at any moment. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but a part of me was terrified of what I might hear, terrified of the confirmation of my worst fears. I kept telling myself to be rational. There had to be another explanation. Maybe she'd been blackmailed, forced into it. But the nature of the transaction, the offshore account, it all pointed to something far more personal, far more sinister. That evening, I came home early. I needed to see her, to try and read her, to see if I could catch her off guard. The house was quiet when I walked in. Sarah was in the living room, on her laptop, wearing one of her usual working-from-home outfits, leggings and a soft sweater. She looked up, a genuine smile on her face. "Hey, you're home early," she said, her voice light. I forced a smile back. Yeah, just had a lot on my mind. I sat down on the sofa, trying to keep my breathing even. My eyes scanned the room, looking for anything out of place, any clue. Her laptop was open to a design program, something about a new client. It looked innocent enough, but the dissonance was deafening. The woman sitting in front of me, the woman who was supposed to be my partner, my confidant, was also the woman who was secretly draining our finances for another man. "Everything okay?" she asked, her brow furrowing slightly. I hesitated. How could I possibly explain what I'd found? "Just tired," I lied, my voice a little rough. I needed proof. I couldn't go in there blind. I needed to see the actual paperwork, not just a bank statement. I needed to know who this man was, what his lifestyle entailed, how much of our hard-earned money was being funneled into his life. I excused myself to the home office, the room I rarely used anymore. It was filled with old architectural models, dusty blueprints, and the faint smell of stale coffee. I sat at my old desk, the one I used when I first started my own firm, and opened my personal laptop. I logged into my bank account, the one Sarah didn't have direct access to, the one I used for my investments and savings. I went through my statements, looking for any unusual activity, anything that might connect to the secret mortgage. Nothing. That made sense. She wouldn't have used our joint accounts for something this clandestine. This was entirely her own scheme. I decided to try a different approach. I logged into Sarah's online banking portal, using credentials I still had saved from years ago when we managed our finances together more closely. My hands trembled as I typed. I felt like a spy, a detective, a thief, all rolled into one. It was a terrible feeling, a feeling of desperation and violation, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed to know. The portal loaded, and my heart pounded in my chest. I navigated to her transaction history. I scrolled back, my eyes darting across the screen, searching for anything that looked out of the ordinary. And then I saw it. A series of transfers, all small at first, then growing larger. They were routed through a series of shell corporations, a convoluted trail designed to obscure the ultimate destination. But I recognized the name of one of the intermediary companies. It was a firm I'd encountered during a difficult legal dispute with a former business partner. They were known for their discretion, their ability to move money discreetly. And the final destination of those funds, the name that kept popping up at the end of the convoluted chain. It was the same name I'd seen on the secret mortgage statement. The name of her lover. I felt a cold dread wash over me. This wasn't just a one-time thing. This had been going on for months, maybe even years. I dug deeper, trying to trace the actual expenditures. And that's when I found it. A series of receipts, emails, and booking confirmations. Luxury cars, designer clothes, frequent flyer miles to exotic destinations, hotels that cost more per night than my monthly mortgage payment. It was a lifestyle of unimaginable excess, all funded by our home, by our future. The sheer scale of it was staggering. I felt a wave of nausea, a hot flush of anger and despair. I looked at the details, the dates, the amounts. It was all there, the irrefutable proof. I sat there in the dim light of the office, surrounded by the ghosts of my past ambitions, staring at the wreckage of my present. I heard Sarah call my name from the living room, her voice cheerful, oblivious. "Honey, are you coming? I was thinking we could order pizza." My hands were still on the keyboard, my eyes fixed on the screen, on the undeniable evidence of her betrayal. The pizza order felt like a cruel joke, a mundane request in the face of the monumental destruction that had just been revealed. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. All I could do was stare at the screen, at the name of the man who was living a life of luxury on our dime, and the woman who had enabled it, the woman I had loved. The weight of it all, the sheer audacity and the depth of the deception was crushing. And then I heard another sound, a sound that froze the blood in my veins. A car door slamming shut outside. And it wasn't my car. The slam of a car door, unfamiliar, echoed through the house. My head snapped up from the laptop screen, the bright glow momentarily blinding me. Sarah called my name again, a touch of impatience now in her tone. "Seriously, honey, come on, I'm starving." But I wasn't listening. My gaze was fixed on the living room window, the one that looked out onto our quiet suburban street. Streetlights cast long shadows, distorting the familiar shapes of the oak trees and the neighboring houses. A car was pulling into our driveway. Not ours. A sleek, dark sedan, one I'd never seen before. It idled for a moment, its headlights cutting through the night, before the engine died. A door opened. A man's silhouette emerged, tall and broad-shouldered. He moved with a casual confidence that sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. He didn't look like a neighbor stopping by. He looked expected. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, suffocating silence that had fallen over me. I felt a primal urge to hide, to disappear, but my body was frozen, a statue carved from ice and disbelief. I saw Sarah get up from the sofa, a confused frown on her face, and walk towards the front door. The dread intensified, clawing at my throat. This was it. This was the moment. The abstract horror I'd been wrestling with all day was about to materialize, to stand before me, a living, breathing embodiment of Sarah's deceit. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling like lead, and moved towards the hallway, my eyes glued to the front door. Sarah opened it, and there he was. Taller than I'd imagined, with a confident smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He was impeccably dressed, a crisp designer shirt unbuttoned at the collar, tailored slacks. He carried a small, expensive-looking gift bag. "Hey, you," he said, his voice smooth, casual. Sarah blinked, taken aback for a split second, but then her expression shifted, a practiced ease falling over her. "Leo? What are you? I thought you were out of town," she stammered. A nervous laugh escaped her. Leo. That was the name. The name from the mortgage. The name from the offshore transfers. The name of the man who had been living a lavish life on our money. My breath hitched. I was standing just out of sight, in the shadows of the hallway, a voyeur to my own destruction. The scene unfolding before me was surreal, a twisted play where I was the unwitting audience and the unacknowledged protagonist. Leo stepped further into the entryway, his eyes sweeping past Sarah, landing on me for a brief, almost dismissive flicker.
He didn't acknowledge me, didn't seem to register my presence beyond a casual glance. It was as if I was furniture, something inconsequential in the background. "Change of plans," he said, turning his attention back to Sarah, his smile widening. He reached out, his hand brushing her arm. "Decided to surprise you, and I brought you something." Sarah's face flushed, a mixture of surprise and something else I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't the flush of a woman caught off guard by a surprised guest. It was the flush of a woman caught in a lie, trying desperately to maintain control. "Oh, Leo, you shouldn't have," she said, her voice a little breathy. She glanced back towards me, a fleeting, almost pleading look in her eyes. It was a look that screamed, "Help me, fix this, pretend you don't see." But I couldn't pretend. Not anymore. The carefully constructed facade of our marriage had crumbled, revealing the rot beneath. I stepped out of the shadows. My voice, when it came, was a low growl, rough and unfamiliar even to me. "Leo?" I repeated, my gaze locked onto him. He turned, his expression shifting from playful charm to a cool assessment. He recognized me, that was clear. The ease in his posture faltered for a fraction of a second. Sarah gasped, a hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with panic. "Honey, what? Leo, this is—" "I know who he is, Sarah." I cut her off, my voice hardening. "He's the reason our house has a second mortgage." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Leo's eyes narrowed, his confident smirk replaced by a predatory glint. Sarah's face paled, her carefully constructed composure shattering. She looked like a cornered animal. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Leo chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. "He found out, huh? Well, that's unfortunate. Though, honestly, I figured it was only a matter of time. You two haven't exactly been a united front for a while now, have you?" His words were like poison, dripping with insinuation and a cruel understanding of our dynamics. He was deliberately trying to sow discord, to twist the knife. "Shut up," I snarled, taking a step towards him. My hands were clenched into fists, my knuckles white. Every fiber of my being screamed for violence, for a physical release of the pent-up rage and pain. Leo didn't flinch. He held his ground, his gaze steady and unwavering. He seemed almost amused by my fury. "Easy there, pal," he said, holding up his hands placatingly, but his eyes were anything but placating. "No need to get violent. This is between you and Sarah, right?" Sarah finally found her voice, though it was a choked whisper. It's not what you think," she said, her eyes darting between me and Leo. "Leo is just a business associate. He was helping me with an investment." The lie was so transparent, so pathetic, it was almost laughable. Almost. "An investment?" I scoffed, the sound harsh and disbelieving.
"An investment that requires a secret second mortgage on our home, Sarah? An investment that channels funds into offshore accounts and pays for luxury cars and trips to God knows where? Is that what you call it? An investment?" My voice rose with each word, the carefully controlled calm I'd been trying to maintain dissolving into raw emotion. Leo smirked. "She's got good taste," he said, his gaze flicking to Sarah. "And she's been a very generous investor." The casual way he said it, the implied intimacy, the possessiveness in his tone was a fresh stab to the gut. He spoke of her as if she were his property, as if our entire life together was a mere footnote in his grand scheme. Sarah flinched at his words, her eyes pleading with me. "Please, let's talk about this inside," she said, her voice cracking. "Talk about what, Sarah?" I demanded, my voice shaking. About how you've been systematically draining our savings? About how you've been lying to me for months, maybe years? About how you've been involved with him? The last word was a struggle, ripped from my throat. Leo stepped forward, his demeanor shifting. The playful charm was gone, replaced by a hard edge. Look, man, I don't want any trouble. Sarah and I have an understanding. This is her life, her decisions. Her decisions? I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping me. And what about my decisions? What about the life we were building together? Was that just some side project you could casually abandon when something shinier came along? I turned to Sarah, my eyes burning into hers. Who is he, Sarah? Really? Tell me the truth, for once. She stood frozen, trapped between us, her face a mask of despair. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't cry. It was as if all her emotions had been turned to stone. It's complicated, she whispered. Complicated doesn't cover a secret second mortgage, Sarah, I said, my voice dangerously low. Complicated doesn't cover him standing in our entryway, acting like he owns the place. Leo let out another sigh, a performance of annoyance. Okay, look, I'm not here to cause drama. I just came to drop this off for Sarah. He held out the gift bag. Sarah took it hesitantly, her hand trembling. Leo, maybe you should go, Sarah said, her voice barely audible. Leo gave me a challenging look. Yeah, maybe I should. Don't want to intrude on family matters. He turned and walked back to his car, the same casual confidence now tinged with a clear sense of victory. He got in, started the engine, and drove away, the tires crunching on the gravel drive. The moment his car disappeared down the street, the heavy silence returned, thicker and more suffocating than before. Sarah finally broke, collapsing against the doorframe, the gift bag falling from her numb fingers. She buried her face in her hands, her body racked with silent sobs. I stood there, watching her, the rage still simmering, but now overlaid with a profound sense of loss and confusion.
The shock of seeing Leo, of hearing his words, of Sarah's utter inability to defend herself had left me numb. So, I began, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. Who is he, Sarah? She didn't look up. Her sobs subsided, replaced by ragged breaths. He's someone I met through work. A few years ago. At a conference. A few years ago? My head snapped up. We've been married for 7 years, Sarah. And we've been together for 10. How long has this been going on? She shook her head, tears still streaming down her face. It wasn't like this at first. It was just friendly. He was offering advice about investments, about managing my career. Career? I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. You were investing our home in your career? With him? She's very successful. She mumbled, her voice muffled by her hands. He knows how to make money grow. I was trying to build something for us. For our future. Our future? I walked towards her, my voice rising again. Our future is in this house, Sarah. The house we bought together, the house we poured our savings into, the house that you just took out a second mortgage on behind my back to fund this man's lavish lifestyle. She finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and full of a desperate sort of apology. I know I messed up. I got in too deep. He promised me it would all pay off. That we'd be set for life. We were set for life, Sarah? I yelled, the sound echoing in the hall. We had a good life. We had a home. We had trust. What happened to that? I was unhappy. She whispered, her voice barely audible. I felt stuck. Like I was just going through the motions. He made me feel alive again. He made me feel special. The admission hit me like a physical blow.
unhappy, stuck, made to feel alive by him? The words swam in my head, a chaotic jumble of betrayal and pain. I looked at her. This woman I had loved, this woman I had built my life with. And I saw a stranger who had betrayed me in the most profound way imaginable. "So you risked everything?" I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Our home? Our financial security? Our entire marriage? For a man who makes you feel alive? For a fleeting feeling?" She nodded, a single tear rolling down her cheek. I didn't think you'd ever find out. I thought I could manage it. I thought I could fix it before you ever knew. You thought I was that stupid?" The question hung in the air, heavy with accusation. "No. I thought you were busy. I thought you wouldn't notice. I wanted more. For us. More than what we had." I gestured around the house, the solid, comfortable home we had built. "More than this? More than me?" She shook her head frantically. "No, never more than you. I love you. I do. This was a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake." But her words felt hollow.
The evidence on my laptop, the appearance of Leo, the confession of her unhappiness, the financial ruin, it all painted a picture of calculated deceit, not a simple, regrettable mistake. I looked at the gift bag she had dropped. "What is that?" I asked, my voice laced with suspicion. She hesitated, then picked it up. "It's a thank you gift, for him, for his help." She opened it slowly, revealing a sleek silver watch, the kind that costs more than my car. It was engraved on the back. I leaned closer to read it. "To my investor," it said, "always looking forward." My breath caught in my throat. Investor. Not lover, not confidant, investor. It was a coded message, a confirmation of their shared secret, their illicit financial dealings. It was a slap in the face, a definitive statement of her allegiance. My mind reeled. She hadn't just been having an affair. She had been actively participating in a financial scheme that jeopardized everything we had. And she had chosen him, the architect of her newfound aliveness, the beneficiary of our home's equity. I backed away from her, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. The love I felt for her, the shared memories, the years of commitment, they all seemed to crumble into dust in the face of this stark, undeniable betrayal. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time, I saw not the woman I loved, but a stranger, a con artist, a thief. "Get out," I said, my voice a harsh whisper. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "What?" I said, "Get out," I repeated, my voice gaining strength. "Take your things, take your investor, and get out of my house." She stared at me, tears streaming down her face again. "Please," she pleaded, "don't do this. We can fix this. We can sell the house, pay him off, start over." "Start over," I laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "You think we can just start over after this? You think I can ever trust you again? You think I can look at you and not see him, not see the mortgage, not see the lies?" "But I love you," she cried. "Do you?" I countered, my voice laced with pain. "Because the Sarah I know, the Sarah I loved, would never do this. She wouldn't betray me like this. She wouldn't put our home, our future at risk for a man she met at conference and who makes her feel alive for a few months." She stood there, trembling, the watch still clutched in her hand. The silence stretched, broken only by her choked sobs. I felt a hollowness in my chest, a vast emptiness where love and trust used to reside. This wasn't just about infidelity, it was about a fundamental violation of everything we were. "I want you to leave," I said, my voice firm, resolute. "Now, before I change my mind and call the police." The threat hung in the air, a grim testament to the chasm that had opened between us. Her face crumbled, the realization of my seriousness finally sinking in.
She turned, her shoulders slumped in defeat, and walked towards the stairs, leaving me standing alone in the hallway, the ghost of Leo's car door slamming still echoing in my ears. The weight of it all, the sheer magnitude of her betrayal, threatened to crush me. I looked at the front door, the portal through which her deceit had arrived, and wondered if I would ever feel safe in my own home again. The watch, still in her hand, a symbol of their shared secret, felt like a brand, searing itself into my memory. And then, as she reached the top of the stairs, she paused, looking back at me. Her expression was unreadable, a mixture of grief and something else, something that chilled me to the bone. "You have no idea what you've just done," she whispered, her voice barely audible. And then she disappeared into the darkness of the upstairs hallway, leaving me alone with the crushing weight of my reality and the unsettling echo of her cryptic warning. The house felt too big, too quiet, suddenly. The air, thick with unspoken words and shattered trust, pressed in on me. I walked past the living room, the scene of Sarah's initial lie, the one about the late dinner, the one that now felt like a distant memory, a quaint preamble to this all-consuming disaster. I'd always thought of this house as ours. Now, standing in the echoing emptiness, it felt solely mine, a monument to a shared life that had just been demolished. I didn't know what to do with myself. My hands felt useless, my mind a chaotic battlefield of regret and a burning, hollow ache. I found myself drawn to the kitchen, the heart of our home, or what used to be the heart. I opened the refrigerator, the cool air hitting my face, and stared blankly at the shelves. Half-eaten containers of food, the remnants of meals we'd shared, now felt like artifacts from a foreign country, a place I no longer belonged. I closed it without taking anything. I walked to the window above the sink, the one overlooking the backyard. The deck furniture was still out, the grill covered, a silent testament to summer evenings that now felt impossibly distant. I remembered building that deck with Sarah, laughing, sweating, our hands calloused but our spirits high. We were a team then. Now, the thought of her, of him, of the insidious way they had undermined everything we had, made my stomach churn. I gripped the edge of the counter, my knuckles white. I wanted to scream, to break something, to shatter the quiet that felt like a mocking whisper of our former peace. But the rage had curdled, transforming into a profound, debilitating weariness. It was the weariness of realizing you've been fighting a war you never knew existed, and you've lost everything. I thought about my parents, their marriage a bedrock of quiet strength and unwavering loyalty. They'd always seemed so normal, so settled. I'd envied them that easy certainty of a future built on shared foundations. Now, their example felt like a cruel taunt.
What was normal anymore? What was certain? My world had been upended, its foundations ripped out under me. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass of the window, the faint outline of Sarah's silhouette, a fleeting image of her desperate pleading, seared into my mind. She had begged me not to do this, to not change our lives. But she was the one who had changed them. She was the one who had decided our shared reality was no longer enough. My phone buzzed on the counter. I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. It was probably Sarah, trying to reach me, to plead, to explain, to try and salvage something. I ignored it. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear her voice, laced with manufactured sorrow or genuine regret. It didn't matter. The damage was done. The trust was gone. And the implication of her final words, "You have no idea what you've just done," lingered like a bad omen. What had I done? I had acted out of righteous anger, out of a desperate need for truth. Had I destroyed us, or had she already done that, and I was just the instrument of its final demise? I walked into the living room, the same room where I'd seen her laptop open, the same room where she tried to distract me with dinner plans. It felt tainted. Every object, every photograph on the mantelpiece seemed to mock me. A framed picture of us on our honeymoon, beaming, so full of hope. I picked it up, my fingers tracing the outline of her face. She looked so innocent, so unaware of the darkness lurking beneath the surface. Was she always this way? Had I been willfully blind? Or had this man, Leo, unlocked a part of her I never knew existed? A part that craved something more, something dangerous. I walked over to the bookshelf and ran my fingers along the spines of our books. books we'd read together, discussed, recommended to each other. Now they felt like silent witnesses to a betrayal so profound it rendered all shared intellectual and emotional intimacy meaningless. I pulled out a worn copy of a novel she loved, a story about love and sacrifice. The irony was suffocating. Sacrifice. What had she sacrificed? My trust, our home, our future? And for what? A man who made her feel alive? A fleeting sensation that had cost us everything. I thought about the implications of her warning. You have no idea what you've just done. Was she suggesting I had made a terrible mistake by forcing her hand? That by pushing her to leave I had unleashed something worse? Or was she simply expressing her own despair, her own recognition that our lives as we knew them were irrevocably shattered? I couldn't shake the feeling of unease, the prickle of fear that perhaps I had underestimated Leo, or Sarah's capacity for self-destruction. I sat down on the sofa, the cushions still bearing the faint scent of her perfume, a scent I once found comforting, now nauseating. I closed my eyes, trying to shut out the overwhelming reality, but it was no use.
The images flashed behind my eyelids, Leo's smirking face, Sarah's panicked eyes, the engraved watch, the numbers on the screen of her laptop, the chilling confession of her unhappiness. It was a torrent of information, a visual and emotional assault that left me breathless. I opened my eyes and looked around the room. It was still our home, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage set where the final act had just played out, leaving me alone with the debris. I stood up and walked to the front door, as if I could physically erase the moment Leo had arrived. I opened it and looked out into the darkness. The street was quiet, bathed in the amber glow of the streetlights. No sign of Leo's car, no sign of the disruption he had brought. Just the usual suburban stillness. But the stillness felt wrong now, a fragile veneer over a deep, unsettling unrest. I walked back inside and closed the door, locking it with a decisive click. It was a futile gesture, a symbolic act of trying to regain control. Control had been stolen from me, piece by piece, by the woman I loved and the man she had welcomed into our lives. I sank back onto the sofa, the exhaustion washing over me in waves. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know how I would begin to pick up the pieces, how I would navigate the wreckage of my life. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The man who had walked into this house earlier, the man who had been unknowingly betrayed, was not the same man sitting here now. Something in me had been irrevocably broken, and something else, something harder perhaps, had begun to form in its place. I thought about the future, a future I had so clearly envisioned with Sarah, a future that now felt like a phantom limb, a painful ache for something that would never be. The financial implications were a looming nightmare, a dark cloud that threatened to engulf me. The house, our sanctuary, was now a potential asset for Leo, a symbol of Sarah's folly and my ruin. I imagined the lawyers, the discussions, the protracted legal battles that would follow. It was a prospect that made me want to curl up and disappear. But the warning, her final cryptic words, kept echoing in my mind. You have no idea what you've just done. Was there more to this than just infidelity and financial recklessness? Was there a deeper game being played? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I had acted on instinct, on a need for clarity. But perhaps in forcing the issue, I had triggered a chain reaction I couldn't comprehend. I looked at my phone again. It was still silent. I wondered if she was with Leo now, if she was seeking solace in his arms, if my actions had driven her further into his embrace. The thought was a fresh wave of agony, a bitter pill to swallow. Had I pushed her into the very situation I was trying to escape? The questions gnawed at me, relentless and unanswerable. I stood up and walked over to the window again, staring out at the dark expanse of the yard. The moon was high now, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe and shift. It was a landscape of fear and uncertainty. I had always prided myself on my ability to see things clearly, to face challenges head-on. But this was different. This was an emotional earthquake, a seismic shift that had left me disoriented and adrift.
I thought about the conversations I would have to have, the explanations I would have to give. To my friends? To my family? How could I possibly articulate the depth of this betrayal, the sheer audacity of her actions? They would think I was exaggerating, that I was letting my emotions cloud my judgment. But I knew the truth, raw and brutal, that had been laid bare before me. I walked into our bedroom. It felt alien. Her side of the bed was still neatly made, a stark contrast to the chaos that had erupted in my world. I looked at her closet, a kaleidoscope of her clothes, her essence. It was overwhelming. I couldn't stay here. Not tonight. Not anymore. I needed to escape the suffocating weight of her presence, even in her absence. I grabbed a duffel bag from the hall closet and started throwing in a few essentials. A change of clothes, my toothbrush, my laptop. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to go. The thought of calling a friend, of seeking comfort, felt like an admission of weakness, a confirmation of Sarah's assertion that I was somehow out of my depth. But I knew, deep down, I couldn't do this alone. As I zipped up the bag, my hand brushed against a small framed photograph tucked away on the shelf above the closet. It was a picture of me and my dad, taken years ago on a fishing trip. He was smiling, his arm around the shoulders, a picture of quiet strength and unconditional love. I picked it up and held it tightly. He had always been my anchor, my confidant. Maybe, just maybe, I could still find some solace in his wisdom. I walked back into the living room, the duffel bag slung over my shoulder. The house stood silent, a monument to a love that had been brutally dismantled. I looked at the framed wedding photo on the mantelpiece, the one of Sarah and me, radiating happiness. I hesitated for a moment, then carefully took it down. It was too painful to look at. I placed it face down on the coffee table. I stood by the front door, the cold metal of the doorknob in my hand. I took a deep breath, trying to steel myself for whatever lay ahead. The weight of the past, the uncertainty of the future, pressed down on me. But as I opened the door and stepped out into the night, a faint, almost imperceptible shift occurred within me. The rage, the confusion, the despair, they were still there, a swirling vortex of emotions. But beneath them, a new, hard-won resolve began to solidify. I had been stripped bare, betrayed in the most fundamental way, but I was still standing.
And that in itself was a victory. I walked away from the house, from the wreckage of our life, the cool night air a balm on my scorched soul, leaving behind the ghost of a love that had been extinguished, and stepping into a future that for the first time felt entirely my own, however bleak it might be. The darkness outside was vast, but it was also empty, and in that emptiness there was a strange, chilling kind of freedom.